Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wareham Planning Board, Monday, September 25, 2023, at the Multi-Service Center, Room 320, 48 Marion Road, Wareham, Mass. 02571. Also available online at the Zoom connection noted on the agenda. I'd like to call the meeting to order with a roll call. Sherry Quirk?
Here.
Mike Baptiste?
Here.
Jane Gleason?
Here.
Sam Corbett?
Here.
Carl Schultz?
Here.
And the chair, Michael King, is here. We have a full board. Preliminary business, approval of the meeting minutes for 8/14/2023. Has everybody had a chance to review and comment or concerns?
None.
Sure.
I'm not going to talk about your, I don't believe it properly recorded the vote on the approval of the minutes that were recorded in there, but that's Mr. Corbett's. Two things that are concerned. There's no mention of the discussion of Article 3 of the bylaw amendment. It doesn't even say we had a discussion. There wasn't anything significant in that portion of the discussion. More important, I believe, is there's no mention, discussion of Article 12, 16.9, and the vote that we took to change the wording of the article submission to say that we were going to completely delete 1216.9 as opposed to the modification of the wording that I had submitted. So that's not recorded as I can see in the minutes. So unless I misremember, I'm looking at Sherry, is that, we did vote on that, right? And we did,
I think we did, yeah.
and we changed what we submitted to the warrant, right, for 1216.9?
That's correct.
And this was
What
on,
was submitted for the warrant is the language that Ken submitted.
No, that was different.
Okay.
That was the radio bylaw. I'm talking about deleting 1216.9. I'll follow up with you afterwards. But we did discuss that, and we voted to change the language. I hope that I sent you the next morning revised language.
Let's discuss.
I'll follow
Right.
with you offline.
Yeah, but we may want to
so
not vote on this.
right, to err
All
on
right,
the
but those were my two concerns, and of course now, because it's not in the minutes, I can't even refresh Ms. Quirk's memory. So.
Is there any other comments or concerns on the minutes of August 14? Okay, hearing none, and noting Mr. Schultz's concern, I would entertain a motion to not act on these minutes until the matter of Article 12 is clarified with the planning office and can be incorporated into the minutes.
So if we could pull back on my comment, that may have been the 9/6 meeting that I'm remembering, because we talked about the minutes.
I would still rather err on the side of caution.
No, I believe I'm mistaken now that I'm looking at Sherry, because we did the review on the 6th, right? When?
Yes. I did the review on the 6th. That's,
I'm trying to think of the order of our meeting.
let's reconstitute it later and bring it back.
We'll regroup.
We'll hold on to that and discuss that then later in the meeting.
You want a
Approval?
motion, Mike?
I'm sorry?
You want a motion?
Yes.
Make a motion, we table them.
Table this till later in the
Oh,
meeting.
set the minutes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Sam Corbett, seconded by Mike Baptiste. All in favor? Sherry?
I,
Mike?
Aye.
Jane?
This is just to table 814?
Right.
Okay.
Till later in the meeting.
Aye.
Sam?
Aye.
Carl?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Moving on to meeting minutes for 8/28/2023. Do we have any concerns, comments? None? Then I would entertain a motion that we accept as presented by the planning office the meeting minutes for Monday, August 28, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Sam Corbett, seconded by Sherry Quirk. All in favor? Sherry?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
Sam?
Aye.
Carl?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Okay. Next up, 13-23, Nazi Ekel, I can never say his name right, I apologize. El Kalazi, A&R Main Street, High Street. Do we have someone here?
Yes, sir.
You do.
I'll just hold it up briefly.
Okay.
Good evening. Brian Grady, GAF Engineering, here for Mr. El Khalasi. What we're looking to do this evening is modify a previously approved A&R plan. It was endorsed by this board in March of last year. Since that time, the existing home on the site has been raised, so that allows us to make this modification. So the area I highlighted in orange is the change that's occurring. So if you remember the home that was on the site, when we initially did the A&R plan, we had to put a few bends and, to get around the existing home to meet the zoning setback requirements. Now that the home has been raised, we're able to straighten out that line. So it's a minor modification, change to the plan. What it actually does is add about 14 square feet to the lot that fronts on Main Street. All the lots, there's no change in any of the frontages. The lots are still fully compliant. The lots on High Street all meet the area requirement. So in a nutshell, that's all we're doing, straightening out that line now that the existing dwelling has been raised, and 14 extra square feet go to the lot that fronts on Main Street.
Okay, thank you. I had one quick question before we get too far into it. I'm a little confused, and maybe it's just my research skills are not as good as they could be, but I'm looking at the revised site plan from the ZBA for the property, for the buildings that are facing Main Street, and it shows 4 structures. This paperwork in your drawing shows 3 structures.
Well, there's 3 on High Street. This doesn't show any structures because at the time this plan was prepared, none of the foundations were in. So there are 4 proposed duplexes on this lot. But at the time of the preparation of this plan, none of them existed.
Okay. I don't have any questions. It seems, I mean, I'm sure there's a reason behind it, but it seems like a lot of work and expense to straighten a line out and add 14 feet to an already approved house lot, but it's Mr. Akalazi's money, so I don't have anything else.
I'm actually curious about the easement that's at the back of, that's actually, you're taking some of the orange is out of that easement that's behind the 3 buildings.
Yeah, the easement doesn't change. The lot line changes to the rear of that.
Yeah, honestly, I'm curious because that easement does not ever touch on a public way. And it's a access and utility easement. I was just curious.
Yeah, it's providing access for the lot that fronts Main Street over the 3 lots on High Street. So this lot will enjoy access and utility. So people who live here could use that, maybe put up a swing set or something. And the utilities for the dwellings that'll be constructed on Main Street, the water services, are in this easement, because behind the proposed dwellings, there's roof drainage, structures in the ground, so we had to move the water services a little bit further back to get away from the roof drainage structures. So that's the utility that's back there.
Yeah, so it's not really about access because it doesn't touch on any public way.
Yeah, it's not for access for vehicles, pedestrian access, walking, and, so access for homeowners and residents of the dwelling. So it's not a vehicle access, correct?
Yeah, it's just an interesting use of the term access.
Yep, I thought the same thing. And 30 feet seems pretty substantive to run some water lines and whatnot. That seems like a lot of real estate to dig a trench or two and run water lines and utilities and whatnot.
Well, it sounds like it's a way to get more space, more yard space for the 4 units that are pretty well shoehorned into the lot on Main Street.
Yeah, but again, I mean, well, not that it matters, but why? It's already been approved.
Yeah, no, I was just curious more than anything. Yeah, I don't,
Sam? Carl? Sherry?
Nothing for me.
Mike?
Nope, I'm lost for words.
Jane?
no, I think that was my only question.
Okay. So straightening that line out has no adverse effect on the 3 duplexes on High Street as far as property size? Because I know those, when that project first came to us originally, I think those properties were like 15,003 feet, 15,008 feet. It was pretty close to the
Yeah, it's
minimum.
close. They're all about the same. They're still
For the record,
compliant.
they're all still 15,000 square feet or better.
Correct, yes.
Okay. Anybody want to make a motion?
I move that we approve the A&R for Project 1323 Nazia Galassi A&R for Main Street, High Street.
Second.
We have a motion by Carl Schultz, seconded by Sam Corbett. All in favor? Sherry?
I,
Mike?
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
Sam?
Aye.
Carl?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you for your time tonight, sir.
Thanks very much.
Next up, under preliminary business, 14-23 Swebco LLC, A&R, 13 Swifts Beach Road.
Hey, guys.
Good evening. You could identify yourself for the board, please?
Yeah, hi, I'm Steve Webby. I'm one of the owners of Swebco, and we own the piece of land that has the existing dwelling on, right behind Damien's being built now. Our existing lot, do you guys have the map in front of you? Okay. Our existing lot is a combination of what would be called the new lot, 1001A, and parcel B on the bottom half. We're purchasing parcel A from the fellas that own the tower, and we'd just like to combine parcel A with parcel B and then split our lot to have 2 conforming lots.
Thank you.
And a quick summary, we're just buying the little triangle piece on the bottom left there, and we're adding that to our existing property and then splitting our lots. Or splitting our lot into 2 lots.
This is the Damien one right here. Yeah, right, this was Beach Road, yeah.
I think I asked this question before. I know we approved the prior A&R. Is Brown Street an accepted way? It's not paved, it's,
Brown Street is paved.
oh, at that point, it is paved?
Yeah, it's paved all the way down.
Not all
I
the
actually
way.
I don't know when it stops, but it's
Okay.
not at our property. I've never been fully down. I usually stop to eat dinner right there, and that's as far as I
Yeah,
go.
okay, no, if you keep going, then it's not paved, but so.
Oh,
it's-
really?
So it's.
This is a paved area.
Okay, all right.
And, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. So does this leave what says new lot 1001A as a conforming lot? Like, does the
Yeah, so
circle fit,
that still conforms with what's existing there.
radius fits in there?
Yes, everything there still stays the conforming.
And is Lot D separate from the lot that has the tower on it?
Yeah, so parcel B is what we own currently, which includes lot 1001D. That's a combo of parcel A and B.
Yep.
So we own the right side of that, and we're buying the left side. We'd like to combine the two. And it was originally accepted, but we were like a couple square feet off or something like that. I can't remember how much it was, but we had to take a little bit smaller of a piece from the tower for some deal they're working on to work.
So he's adding this to this, make this a buildable lot.
They got area, they got access, they got frontage.
Now, what about the utility easement? The 50-foot wide easement shows up on lot 1001D, but it sort of gets clipped at the corner of of what is parcel A that's being combined with it. Is that going to continue out to Brown as fully 50 feet wide?
The easement won't change. I guess I don't understand the question. Is your copy maybe have it a little bit dulled out?
Yeah, the easement line, when it gets down to that little triangle that you're talking
That's
about,
parcel A?
Yep.
the easement line disappears on the drawing.
It doesn't connect to Brown across parcel A?
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, the easement will continue. I'm not sure why the line's not there.
Yeah, it's missing right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't come all the way through. And we can't condition an A and R,
No,
so we can't condition it on the assumption that that easement be corrected on a subsequent drawing. I don't think the easement changes the fact that it has area, frontage, and access.
right. I don't think that,
Yeah. And just note it for the record that that
Yeah.
line's missing.
Yeah, fair.
Should it ever come up in the future, we've discussed it. Anything else?
Just haven't fixed the Mylar before we sign it, that's all.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Draw it right in, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Jane's-
before
Jane's
we sign
qualified for that.
before we sign the Mylar, we'll just have it fixed. Okay, any other questions or concerns?
No.
Okay, I'd entertain a motion to,
Did you get that? We want to fix the Mylar for the easement line?
Well, yeah, we're not going to sign it until the
I
Mylар's
just
fixed.
Okay.
wanted to make sure the applicant...
that's
It's
fine.
not a condition of approval, it's
Yeah.
just...
Yeah, no problem.
Just attention to detail.
Yeah.
Okay, entertain a motion? Won't
I
everybody
move that
rush?
we approve 1423 Swebco LLC A&R for 13 Swifts Beach Road, with the note that we're going to get an amended Mylar.
Okay. We have a second. Motion by Carl Schultz, seconded by Sam Corbett. All in favor? Sherry?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
Sam?
Aye.
Carl?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Cool.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys.
You guys want to keep your copies? You know, I don't need them back, I just...
I had one already.
There you go, Mike. This is 1623.
Okay, next up, 16-23 Ross J. Sarmento, A&R, 2230, 2232 Cranberry Highway.
Good evening.
Evening.
My name is Craig Hartwell. I'm here on behalf of Ross J. Sarmento, who's the owner of 2230-2232 Cranberry Highway. And we're seeking your endorsement on an approval not required plan where we are looking to shift the lot line out of the current dwelling and provide the setbacks as needed.
That one there had me confused. How'd we build a house in the middle of a lot line?
I have no idea.
It's the second time that's happened in the last 2 meetings.
We're trying to fix it. You'll see on the plan that both dwellings have existing septic systems in place and that the frontage for both lots is going to remain the same even though the lot line is shifting.
How do we get past the frontage question?
Huh?
How do we get past the frontage?
Case law. So long as the pre-existing non-conforming frontage is not getting minimized or reduced, that the case law has shown that the approval cannot be withheld.
But we are technically reducing one of them.
No, you're not. We're sliding it over. So both frontages remain exactly the same.
If you look at it, it goes.
Yeah,
it
I see
sort of
that, this one.
straddles.
Now, how is this different, and I'm asking the board, so how is this different from the one over in Parkwood Beach, where they had two houses on the same lot, and they wanted to divvy them up? And at the end result is that one of the houses was gonna become non-conforming and would have to technically be torn down. So they ended up condoizing them instead to avoid that issue.
So I think that this just keeps the same consistent, non-conforming situation.
So it just,
It just
it just shifts everything to
reallocates.
the
It
left.
just reallocates.
It actually makes it more conforming because it does meet the setback requirements for side yard setback. now.
Right,
No, that and the lot line doesn't go through your living room.
This was,
It's helpful.
yeah.
this was a garage. They converted it into a dwelling.
So it helps the setback, but otherwise it remains the same non-conforming.
Mr. Chairman, through you to the applicant, you're referencing case law. Can you give us the reference?
I can, just give me one moment.
Thanks. Not that I'm a lawyer, but I'm just going to write it down so that I have...
It is the case that is referred to specifically for these situations. Let me pull it up.
Mike, you remember when this one came before us?
I don't.
Ryan, he was doing a lot of building at the time. Because this has a common driveway right on that lot line, right?
Right along there, yes, sir. We'll have to have a common access driveway agreement when we do eventually sell the properties, but
Because that dwelling in the back was a garage. It was
Oh, is that how that's how it became a house?
Converted to a
and
house.
sold as two dwellings on one lot.
Yep.
Because that came up when that was done. Ella?
So does the driveway go up the little
Right in the
skinny
middle.
slot? Oh, in the middle, okay.
Mr. Schultz, you wanted the case information?
Yeah, I just want to write it down.
Sure. It's N Commercial, Inc., v. Gillette, Gillet, and that's a 5-land court reporter at 27 in a 1997 case.
Okay, that'll get into the minutes, right?
I hope so.
Thanks. Just,
Understood.
I can't challenge it, but at least we have it on record.
Does our planning director have any thoughts on this, if I may ask?
If he's on the
Is he on?
call.
I saw him briefly.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm on.
Ken, do you have any thoughts on the case law as governing this?
Yes, the case law allows corrections of parcel boundaries between properties, so long as there isn't violations that are created anew with the lot line reconfiguration.
Thank you.
Is that satisfied? Because it doesn't have frontage, so it still doesn't have frontage for the A&R.
Right.
That's right. It's a pre-existing non-conforming.
Okay. It's no worse than it was.
Exactly.
A little bit better.
Actually, it's a little better. Right.
It's slightly better, okay.
We're looking for even that sliver.
What about the illegal dwelling that Mike mentioned?
That dwelling in the back was built built after 1951. How can we cut that out and make a non-conforming lot? I mean, we have that problem all the time down Swiss Beach. You know, you have three cottages on one lot. If it's built prior to 1951, before zoning, you could physically go, well, you can't stop them from dividing the property.
Right.
This hardship was created upon themselves when they made that illegal dwelling. The prior owner, Ryan Correa, that's who built that, or bought that.
How'd they get a house number?
It was a garage, they converted it.
Yeah, but I mean, shouldn't it be 2230A and 2230B, not a whole brand-new house number?
We had a developer in town that was flying by the seat of his pants, and that was kind of just pushed through, like a lot of other stuff around here.
That could be the case. If it's something that's, it was illegal, this doesn't make it conforming, or even pre-existing non-conforming. If it's illegal, it's illegal.
So if it was built legally or converted legally, then there should be something in the building office to document that, correct?
That's right.
There should be something that's a permit that's, or relief that's granted to allow it to occur.
Because initially, the two dwellings shared the same septic system, I believe, right?
I'm sorry?
The septic system was shared by both dwellings?
It was
I'm
before?
asking you.
I believe so, because they just did the new septic
Right,
system.
yeah.
That was just approved last year, or earlier this year, I believe.
You go back in the minutes on that case, Ken, and you'll see where that came up.
Mike, do you remember when that was?
Oh, geez. Time's going quick when you get older. Probably about 6, 7 years ago. Ryan Correa.
Okay, I'll look and see if I can find. But
The
with
thing is
respect,
that the endorsement of the A and R has nothing to do with the illegal apartment.
that was going to be my question. For an A&R, all we're really looking at is frontage and,
And it doesn't
Square
have
foot.
frontage, right.
right, but we've just been
Frontage-
assured that,
Frontage and the road construction.
so, it's interesting to note that the structure may be illegal, but I don't think we can withhold the A&R approval because of that.
The building commissioner has been looking at recent A and Rs and taking action where an illegal action had occurred, where a zoning violation has occurred because of the A and R.
Right, and it's clearly marked that the A&R does not imply that the planning board believes this is a conforming lot or a buildable lot or just,
If you bring it up on Zillow, it brings it up as one property. Doesn't bring it up as two properties.
well, Zillow's not, we have to go to the registry of deeds.
Well, I understand, but it still leads to Mike's point
Right.
that
Oh, yeah, it's a mess. I agree with Mike. How it got to this point is interesting.
These properties may have been merged at one point, and that's the reason why the extra unit was put on there across the line, because the line was considered a void.
That was a garage initially on their property. It was converted into an apartment illegally.
Always learn something new.
every day, every single day.
Yeah, because the
So
question
by
we had-
approving this A&R, Ken, just to make sure we're all on the same page, we are not endorsing the fact that this
we
second
said that was an illegal
building on this property was built legally.
and they
That's correct. You're not saying anything about the illegality of the existing unit.
It's on the record, that's all I care about.
And,
It's
what's
okay.
the story? She had a pottery business in there. And Van Dusen was there at that time.
Anything else, Mike?
No, no.
Any other comments, concerns?
Well, I think this is terrible because if you go back in the records, a lot of these points were brought up, but since it was a Form A, like I said, it was kind of a dirty deal when it was done. Now it comes back and haunts us.
Yeah.
Because, Swiss Beach haunts it, all the cottage areas, that's been going on for years, prior to 1951 to bring the proof. That building was not constructed before 1951, so how can we make an illegal lot out of it?
I was trying to find it on Google, what year it was built.
So, as I understand, if we approve this A&R, we're not making that building legal.
No. All we're changing are the lot lines.
And so to the extent that it's not legal, it's still subject to legal challenge.
Yes.
And we're setting a precedent.
This is year built 1988 in the assessor's database.
And that's for the right, the
The other one is,
2232.
the other one is 18-something. For the front.
Do we need advice from council?
I think so. I think we're going to set a precedent, Mike. I really do. I think we should ask council on that, what to do, because there's going to be more of them that are going to pop up.
Yeah,
That's happened, especially now, everybody's splitting all the property up.
As I said, the building commissioner is taking it onto his enforcement capabilities to correct where A&Rs have created illegal situations.
but wouldn't it be better if we did our homework and didn't create the situation by granting the A&R?
Unfortunately, you're not capable of doing that under the state law.
So, all right, so this is what I envision, is we grant the A&R, and a month from now, we see 2 for sale signs show up at the end of the driveway, one for house left, one for house right, how does that impact either the seller or the potential buyer?
If they have a good lawyer, they'll do the title search and
But
figure out
wouldn't-
what the property is actually, what legalities there are.
I think all of those are really good questions, but I think they're beyond the scope of what we can,
All right.
I
Well,
mean, we can discuss it, it's fine.
I agree that we're probably discussing outside of our boundaries, but I would rather have the discussion,
Well, I'm not trying
On the
to end
record.
discussion.
and then if we're bound to approve the A&R based on the rules, then so be it, but at least
We had the
the
discussion.
subject was broached.
Mr. Chair, I'm on the zoning board in my town, so I appreciate your concerns. This has been before the building commissioner since June, so he's already reviewed the file and referred us to the planner and then to here for your approval.
Understood, but I don't have any documentation of that.
Well, it's in the, no, it's in the town file, it's in the vision
But it's not
portal.
in the application.
Okay.
So if I can see it and read it, that's one thing.
Understood.
For somebody to tell me, yeah, it exists, I can't take that as the gospel. So, yeah.
See the engineers?
So the date on the front house is 1890.
You know, I can't say nothing, because it's definition.
Confirmed.
Maybe that's how they got the back house built, was because the front house was pre-1951.
No, no, it was a garage.
Yeah.
When Van Dusen moved out and Ryan Cree bought the property,
Well,
they made an apartment upstairs, which was totally illegal.
is it possible that the structure was built,
No, that's a new structure, that's a new garage.
it's a house now?
Yeah.
But it started life out
It
as
was
a
a
garage.
garage.
Right, but I'm wondering if the garage was built about the same time as the
No,
old
that's
house.
that's a new garage that was built. The other garage was falling down, it was a small shabby little shack.
Okay.
And the lady had a pottery business in there, Van Dusen, I believe her name was. And I know there was a lot of conversation about that Farm A when it came in, or when this property came for sale, about the 2 houses on the same lot. If you dig in that file, you'll see it. And it's the same players all the time. You know, like I said, we're gonna set a precedent that it's gonna be back. You're gonna see more of these show up.
Yeah, Van Dusen is on the
Yeah.
ownership history.
Before that was, I can't think of offhand the family that was there prior to that. But the house has been there, like I said, for years. Yeah.
Well, based on guidance from the planning office and the fact that we're being told that we can't deny it based on history, and the fact that we have it on the record that we're questioning the second house and the legality of it being there, I'm going to entertain a motion to approve.
Mr. Chairman, before the motion, if, through the discussion, we could let the scribe know that we want to capture the
Every
discussion,
detail?
as much of the detail of our discussion as possible in the notes.
Yep.
That would be useful. So that's a note to the scribe.
Describe, all right, I agree.
So then I will move that we approve 1623 Ross J. Sarmento, A&R 2230, 2232 Cranberry Highway.
We have a motion by Carl Schultz, seconded by Sam Corbett. All those in favor? Sherry?
I'm going to abstain. I would prefer to get advice of counsel before going forward.
Okay. Mike?
No.
Jane?
I think I'll abstain as well.
Sam?
Yes.
Carl?
Before we complete action, does the applicant have any concern if we defer action
To legal counsel?
till we get a comment? I mean, we're not denying it. We understand we can't deny it, but, or I understand I don't think we can
Right.
deny it, but
We could certainly defer it to counsel.
is there any harm?
I have no objection, Your Honor, because I'm confident in the response you're going to get.
Okay, just to be on the safe side.
Yes, sir.
So I withdraw my motion.
Okay,
Is that okay? Whoever seconded it, is that
that
okay?
would be Sam. Okay, so based on recent discussion, I would entertain a motion that we defer action on 16-23 Ross J. Sarmento, A&R 2230, 2232 Cranberry Highway, until such time we can get some insight from town council.
I think we probably need to defer it to a date certain.
We can do that. I remembered my planner tonight.
And to that end, who's going to reach out to council? Are we going to send them a note, a letter, what?
I'll do it. I'll send him a note.
Sherry? Okay. So,
Could we clarify the issue that's being presented to town council?
Do you want to summarize your question?
We'll just lay out the facts, that there is concern with respect to this A&R that there's an illegal dwelling on this lot, whether there's any issue with us approving the A&R or taking no action. If you would like to frame it in a different way, I would suggest you send a note to the planning director.
No, I think that's fine. I think
Okay.
he can be able to answer that question, and we can respond if needed.
Okay.
so today's 25th. So our next meeting, which I don't believe, I haven't seen the agenda that's building up, but,
It's now the 16th.
right, October 16, and that one there, it is not cluttered as of yet.
No, right now we just have that special permit for cluster development and SPR, Hidden Trails off County Road.
Which meeting is that?
The 16th. Are we going to talk about the battery bylaw?
I think we are, and
That's
the solar bylaw.
And the solar bylaw. So those two bylaws are public hearing, should be noticed for public hearing then.
And I have no doubt that regardless of the input we get from council, this matter should go pretty quickly on the agenda, so I don't have any issue putting it on. So, you're gonna make me say all that again?
I move that we defer a decision on this is 1623, Ross J. Sarmento, A&R 2230, 2232 Cranberry Highway, until October 16th.
15?
16.
16, I believe is the correct date.
Do we have a second? We have a motion by Carl Schultz, seconded by Sam Corbett. All in favor? Sherry?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
Sam?
Aye.
Carl?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If there's any other information you need, please reach out to the planning office, and we're happy to provide it.
All right, thank you. Okay, next up, 17-23 CJE and R Company Incorporated, A&R 3 Tow Road.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Robert Perry, and I represent CJE&R Company, Inc. We have tonight before you an A&R plan with simply taking a large lot and splitting it into two smaller lots. All of the zoning bylaws are satisfied by this split. Well, I think it's relatively straightforward. Happy to answer any questions like you have them.
Would we possessing your paperwork here?
This is the previous,
So what?
that's the previous.
This is a supervisory.
Yes, it is. Actually, originally, they owned that bank property and sold it to the bank, and there's a little right-of-way that, well, it was a right-of-way, we now sold it to Mr. Ciafoni for the restaurant. And so they're down to the last property they own.
You familiar with this property? Mr. J and I told me. the old B&B restaurants right here. This is a big Factory 5 right here.
This is G&F towing,
Yes.
because there's a lot of stuff that creeps over onto this, a lot of stuff looking at Google Earth.
Right. There's a guy working on selling containers there. Part of it, this lot was the old bakery, and they split it in half and sold that to Factory 5. And this is his property right here.
It looks fairly straightforward to me.
Oh, if you look on Google, you see a lot of stuff on there. Yeah, that's it. Is that me?
So it's this property, here. I think this is, that's all cleaned up now?
Oh, is it like that?
Okay, because there are tires back here.
It's pretty straightforward to me. Anybody have any questions?
Entertain a motion to endorse?
We have a motion to endorse. Do we have a second? We have a second. Motion by Mike Baptiste, seconded by Sam Corbett. All in favor? Sherry?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Jay?
Aye.
Sam?
Aye.
Carl?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Item 6, for discussion and possible vote, the preserve on the Weeweeantic Preservation Lane, release of performance bond. Is there anyone here to speak to that? Yes, sir.
Good evening, Brian Grady, GAF Engineering. With me is Scott Blagden, a developer for the subdivision. We have requested, or Scott has requested, a release of the bond for this subdivision previously approved, I think, back in '05. I have met Mr. Menard on site. We walked the site with him. He sent an email to Ken saying he has no issue with the release of the bond. Ken did email Scott earlier today with the question, does this site have an HOA? Because it's a private road, it's to remain private. There is an HOA on the site for the maintenance and upkeep of the road and the utilities and the drainage area. All that has been recorded. So this road is to remain private. The documents are in place. We can provide those to Ken. That email came a little later today, so we weren't able to, or Scott was not able to provide those to Ken, so we can certainly do that. And if we could respond to any questions.
Carl?
Me first?
Sure.
I have several concerns under the subdivision rules and regulations. I can read them. I excerpted, I'm not talking about the whole thing, but for a definitive subdivision regarding completion. Yada, yada, the applicant shall send by registered mail to the town clerk and the planning board a written statement that the said construction or installation with which such bond was given has been completed. Has that registered letter been sent to the clerk and the planning board?
No, sir, we can do that. It's to remain private, so, yeah, we can do that, sure.
Okay. Bigger concern. Such bond deposit, covenant, or agreement shall be contingent upon the completion of such ways, services, and other provisions of sections 5 and 6 of these rules and regulations within 24 months of the date of approval of the definitive plan. We're way past that date.
Yes, we are.
Did you ever file for an extension, notice, anything?
I don't believe any extensions were requested.
Yeah, they weren't formally done. I know I had been in touch with Ken over the years numerous times, but they weren't formally done. What happened with this subdivision was individual lots were purchased, and the homeowners themselves actually, over numerous occasions, over numerous years, asked me to put off the completion of it as homes were being built.
Still, okay, so we did not get an extension of the, so, moving on. The construction of all ways and the installation of all municipal services shall be completed in accordance with the applicable rules and regulations within 24 months. Failure to do so shall automatically rescind approval of the plan. So this, based on that, this plan is no longer approved subdivision. Now, we're way past that, so we just need to work through all these details, and the board needs to discuss. This is like way out of process. I don't even know how to proceed.
Well, just one quick response to that. You know, municipal services are to be completed. The municipal services are owned by the homeowners association. That's specific in the document, so.
It says construction of all ways.
Yeah, the ways, yes, the ways, but the services, you said municipal services. so-
And all municipal services shall be completed
Yeah,
within.
there's sewer and water there, but it's in the documentation that those are owned by the homeowners association.
I'm talking about
Yes,
the
yes,
approval of the subdivision.
correct.
And I'm not, I just don't know how to proceed, given we're so far out of whack with the rules and regulations. I was going to go further. Upon final inspection, a completed Form N shall be submitted to the planning board by the applicant. No lots not previously released in accordance with Section 4C shall be released until Form N has been submitted. How did we release the lots?
I'm not sure. When,
It doesn't seem like any of the subdivision rules and regulations.
The lots were released when the bond was posted.
I'm only saying we need a final inspection. So I'm just trying to, no history was provided to us at all. And it looks like the process, a little fuzzy to me. So I'm
yeah, I'll see if we can provide you an answer with, you know, now that basically the approval's been rescinded, we'll get you responses.
we didn't formally rescind the approval. I'm just saying that's.
Yes, that's standard language, correct,
Yes.
yes.
I don't know what to do. I'm looking to the board. I'm looking to the planning office.
Well,
This is,
here's an example where the last one was before us, or two before us. We're doing house cleaning, a lot of stuff that went on. That was called Tim's Point, I believe, right?
What is it?
Off of Cremisa Road on the right-hand side.
Called
This
what?
development, right?
Preserve on the Weemeanic,
Preserve.
it's just past Lazy Harbor Road,
Preservation
that dirt
It's on the
road.
right-hand side.
Right.
Uh,
Twins Beach is on the left, on
Tim's
the other
Point's on the
side.
other side.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I remember when that came through, Carl. Yeah. And the thing is, they specified when that subdivision, or that came in, it was going to be a private road in perpetuity. Because what's going to happen is once this thing gets signed off, like, we have no inspections, no reports of any inspections all through the years, through the whole process of this development. Then they're going to tell the town, they want the town to accept the road. And,
well, it seems like the town has already accepted it. Or is that what?
Not as a public way,
Not
I
as
think
a
is what
public
Mike's
way,
alluding
okay.
to. No, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, all this needs to be clearly recorded before we, and then I want to know how all this happens, how we get to the point where the six of us are trying to figure this out.
Right. Yeah, basically what we're here is, we're here being asked to release $118,000 on the good word of a handful of people. We have zero to back it up, and, you know, honestly, we just can't do that.
Well, we'll see what we can provide you. Scott will go through his records, and we'll go through our records, and we'll see what we can provide you for the history, inspections.
I think we need to clean this up.
Yep.
I mean, we can't fix the past, but
Well, and by cleaning up the paperwork, I think all it can do is kind of relieve any future headaches for the homeowners, as well as yourself. You know, who knows what's waiting for us? This is what, 20 years old? 2005, I think you said it was?
That was the approval, right. Yeah, so it's coming up on 20 years.
20
Sure,
years.
yeah.
That's a long time for a project not to be finalized and taken off the town's books as complete. So, yeah, I would suggest, I mean, obviously, we'll, it'll be to the vote's pleasure, but I would suggest getting together with the planning office, with the town clerk, with the building inspector, the road commissioner, and getting anything and everything that should have been done, so that we can bring this back and get it taken care of and release your funds for you.
Yeah, we'll see what we can get together and provide to you, certainly, yep.
Okay. Any other comments or concerns?
Just one other comment, which is that we have other applicants here tonight who have come in seeking an extension of a deadline that they were bound by. And I think, and doing what they can to satisfy us that that deadline should be extended. I would hate to send the message that it's okay to pass our deadlines and come in for forgiveness later. It is not better to seek forgiveness than permission.
Well, and I remind the board that 2 weeks ago, an applicant for a subdivision missed the extension, and we rescinded the approval. Unfortunately, at this point, everything's built.
Oak Street.
I guess we could make them tear everything down and which is what the law actually says.
Well,
we
the
could
thing
do.
is, Kyle, the precedent's been set quite a while ago. As we see, we got 2 cases tonight that has stink on it. And, sooner or later, there's some attorney's going to figure out there's a problem, and somebody's going to have a big problem, and it's going to fall back on the town.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
somebody's not doing their job.
Yeah, it's better for us to help you
Yeah.
get this all
Because
cleaned
we
up now.
never had any inspections or anything done on that road way back. I can't remember who the town planner was at that time. It wasn't Ken. But I remember that.
There were inspections done. The road was brought to a certain stage and then stopped. There were inspections done. It was C Consulting, there's documentation. I have a
Okay.
folder of
Well,
documentation.
that
Yeah,
would be
we'll
helpful.
pull that together for you.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was all done, and procedurally, and the steps were done, and then the thing is, it was stopped, because the homeowners didn't want the final curbing and the top coat on, with all the major trucks going in while they were building homes. They kept saying, can you wait to do the top coat and the curbing, because it's just gonna get trashed.
But
So
have you
that-
been building in there for 20 years?
It hasn't been quite that long, but they didn't build them all together. 5 different people bought the lots, and one bought one, and then one bought one a couple years later, and then one bought one.
So you had new homeowners or
Yeah,
new
and they
lot
kept-
owners
and they-
kind of driving
But
the...
all together, they all kept saying, well, we don't want to, you finish it, and it's going to look beautiful, and then he's got to bring his concrete trucks in, so it just kept getting,
Well, they should have read the subdivision
yeah.
rules and
Yeah, I
regulations.
mean, it sounds like they may have created their own headache.
Well, yeah, I mean, it should, honestly, in hindsight, it should have just finished it and let them deal with the damage and the,
Which is basically how a subdivision,
yeah.
Okay, all right, so I would entertain a motion that we defer action on preservation on the Wee Wee Antic until such time that the applicant can supply documentation to support road construction and such. Is the 16th going to give you enough time to put all that together, or should we push it out a little further? I mean, it's been 20 years, an extra week or two, I think, is probably...
Yeah, you can put us back. If we don't have it, we'll just get in touch with Ken. But Scott will get working on getting his files and
Tentatively, we'll
folders
put you on
together.
for the 16th, then?
Sure.
Okay, so,
We'll move.
okay, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Sam Corbett, seconded by Mike Baptiste. All in favor? Sherry?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
Sam?
Aye.
Carl?
I,
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was one we usually got to deal with, this guy here. It was him and his son that developed it. Him and his son developed it. They wanted it to be a gated community.
what do we do with stuff like that?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not saying a word. It's defamation of character. Yeah. I know, he was quite arrogant when he was coming before us. Ken Moniz was his chair, I think, at that time. Yeah. See, people think I'm crazy, but I'm really not.
That's debatable.
Come on, Mike.
Okay. Next up on preliminary business, 7-20 Borrego Solar Systems Incorporated, 27 Charge Pond Road, New Leaf Extension of Time, special permit. Does anybody have any concerns if we hear both the 27 Charge Pond and 150 Tohonet at the same time?
We do not.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board. Greg Sampson with Sullivan and Worcester, here with Jared Connell from New Leaf Energy, Dean Smith from New Leaf Energy. We have some, is Mike on the phone?
Yeah, Nick Petrakis from ESRG should also be on the Zoom.
And then I'll let
Steve Weir with Weston and Sampson Engineers.
And Marie Ruderman with Weston and Sampson.
yeah, go right ahead.
I was just going to say, Jared Connell again from New Leaf Energy. Thanks for having us back in. I think we've got a decent amount to cover tonight, so I'll try to keep the background brief, but the short of it is we've had these two projects that have been on the agenda and were approved through site plan review back in the fall of 2020. We had applied last fall prior to their expiration and have been discussing various aspects of that with the board and some questions that the board has had over the last several months. The reason why we're really here is despite having applied for interconnection more than a year before our site plan applications were submitted, the projects have been unable to advance to construction due to delays in the interconnection process and the issuance of interconnection agreements from Eversource. We feel that those delays constitute a good cause for the extension that we're seeking, and over the past several months, we've reviewed several aspects of the projects, most recently being asked to examine and provide answers to some questions about the battery energy storage components of the projects. We're here tonight prepared to discuss those answers with you, and we'll get right into it. Just one quick note about the approach that we took and the answers that we provided, I believe on Wednesday of last week. We took the questions that we were given back in July very seriously, and we wanted to make sure that we got complete answers to all the questions that the board had. So what we did is we took these questions that were given to us and we scoped out proposals from Weston and Sampson and from who I believe you might be familiar with. They're an infrastructure and engineering and environmental consultant that provides both public and private sector services. And ESRG, Nick, who's on the phone, which is a battery storage and fire safety expert and consultant to help address the 10 questions that the board had asked us back in July. The request that we gave them was to perform research and answer the questions almost as if this was an independent consulting exercise, a peer review exercise of sorts, that they were, as if they were providing information directly to the town, or really to any town, about battery storage for that matter. We understand that the town has several other existing projects in town that are already constructed that have battery storage. You folks have these projects that you're considering, and likely some others that have not completed permitting. And on top of all that, I think Mr. Schultz referenced earlier, you're in initial stages of drafting a standalone energy storage bylaw. So the hope with this approach that we took was that the material that we took time and expense to research and provided and are about to get into discussion of is helpful for all of those items, and the experts that came up with it, along with the New Leaf experts, Dean and Mike, who are sitting behind me, we're all here to present these findings and discuss them with you. So with that, we do have, we prepared the, we took the highlights from the letter that we submitted last week and organized them into a slide deck to hopefully make manage the discussion and make things a little bit more digestible for tonight. I did email those to Ken, but I can also, I can get onto the guest Wi-Fi and share my screen through the Zoom, if that works, or plug in. I don't know what the best method to do that is.
Ken is on, so if he has it, he can run it. Otherwise, yes, he will be able to join the Zoom.
Okay. What's easiest, Ken? Do you want to share the slides that I sent to you, or should I join the Zoom so I can share mine?
Join the Zoom.
He's currently muted, so he's probably not there. Oh, there.
Let me just click into that then. I'm happy to join the Zoom if that's easiest.
I don't see the, when was the presentation sent?
I sent it just a little while ago, just in case there was any internet or connection difficulties tonight. But I am on. I'm happy to join here. It looks like I can launch.
That's probably the best way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. While we're doing that, perhaps. Yeah. Okay. Anyone has any funny jokes to tell while I'm logging in here? Yeah. I promise this won't be another A&R presentation. All right.
Yes. Mute on.
Did. How do I share my screen here? Oh yeah, there we go. All right. Looks like I was able to do that successfully. So yeah, the first thing I was just going to ask is Steve and Marie from Weston & Sampson. They came up with a risk analysis and answered several of the questions just to introduce themselves, provide some background about their firms and their firm and their qualifications, and the high-level findings of the risk analysis that they came up with.
Thanks, Jared. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I don't know you individually, but I work for Weston & Sampson Engineers. Weston & Sampson has been in business since 1899. We work for the town of Wareham, we work for New Leaf, and we work for the property owner, 80 Makepeace. So I thought it important to disclose that to you. When Jared had come to us and asked us to help them answer a series of questions that you folks had on their application, we looked at those relationships first to make sure there was no conflict of interest in what we do for each of these parties. And we don't feel that there is one. In fact, we think that our answers to you, to them, and to the property owner would be the same from an engineering perspective, no matter who asked those questions. And I don't want to bore you with a lot of details. I'm assuming that you know who Weston & Sampson is, but you may not know who I am. And so I've worked for Weston & Sampson for 16 years, and predominantly it's been in the field of renewable energy. We help clients like New Leaf develop projects. We help put together plans and specifications and bring them before planning boards like yours all over the state and all over New England and up and down the East Coast. So we have helped develop projects that total somewhere in the vicinity of 267 megawatts. The number of projects is somewhere on the order of 115. So the average project size is about 2.5 megawatts, 2.3 megawatts. As I said, our company has worked for the town When I look back at the records of what we've done, probably in the last 10 years, we've done 200 projects for the town of Wareham in different services that we provide. Largely, Weston and Sampson is an infrastructure company engaged in water and wastewater business of providing potable water to the public to drink and treating wastewater. That's our bread and butter, and probably 80% of the work that we do is in water and wastewater arenas. For the first 80 years that Weston and Sampson existed as a company, we worked solely for public entities, and we didn't work for any private development. And that changed probably about 40 years ago when the need arose and our company started to expand and do different things. We're a multidisciplinary firm, and so we provide a pretty broad range of services. My background is as a professional geologist. I've worked as a consulting environmental site assessment and cleanup professional for 33 years. In the first 17 or 18 years, I was engaged only in site assessment and cleanup work. And so doing contamination assessment, hydrogeologic assessments on contaminant, fate, and transport were what I focused on. And for the last 16 years, it's been in renewable energy in this capacity. So I just wanted to make sure that you understood a little bit of the background. And I have with me my colleague, Marie Rudeman, who I'll let introduce herself. But she's a toxicologist and a risk assessor, because those skill sets closely align to the questions that you guys had asked.
Right. Well, I'm Marie Rudeman. I'm a human health and environmental risk assessor and toxicologist. I've been with Weston and Sampson since 2013, and I've been doing risk assessment and toxicology for almost 30 years now. So I reviewed the data that's out there. There wasn't a lot of risk assessment data. There was only one that I could just review a summary of, and then but I reviewed the laboratory data on lithium battery fires, and that's how I was able to answer some of the questions.
Thanks. Nick, if you're able to get off mute, let you talk to your firm and your background.
Jared, yeah, perfect. Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Sure. And good evening, members of the board. I really appreciate the invitation, allowing me to join virtually. Apologies for not being there in person, but my name is Nick Petrakis. I'm a professional engineer in the state of New York, Colorado, and California. As you can see from my background there, before joining the company Energy Safety Response Group, I was the Assistant Deputy Director at the New York City Fire Department Sustainability Unit, where we reviewed battery energy storage systems for installation in a densely urban populated environment. I was one of the members that helped develop the codes and standards in New York City for the installation of these systems, safe installation of these systems, and also am a sitting member of the committees, the National Fire Protection Association Committee, NFPA 855, which is the standard for energy storage system installations, as well as the International Fire Codes. You can see on that list over there, and we also sit on a number of UL standards. And one unique thing about Energy Safety Response Group is that we're not just focused on energy safety as far as the installation level, but we also have a full-scale fire and testing lab in Piqua, Ohio, where we actually get to actually burn these systems, and our emergency response procedures, our best practices in our engineering guidance, consulting that we do to companies such as New Leaf Energy is based off of really our firsthand experience with these systems. So I appreciate everyone having me on the call today.
Thanks, Nick. So Marie or Steve, do you want to get into the summary of the overall risk analysis before we dive into the questions?
Sure. So I reviewed what was out there in the literature. I looked specifically for any risk assessments on, previous fires. There was only one that I found, and that was only a summary. I couldn't find a full risk assessment. That was done by Wood, actually a firm that I used to work for, believe it or not. And that was on a fire that was in Arizona, Surprise, Arizona. Pretty big fire where several people were injured, I believe. And they found that there was no significant risk associated with the air exposure into nearby residences, and they also found that there was no need to do any additional assessment outside of the main area of where the fire was. None of the contamination migrated down gradient. The other information that I found was laboratory tests of the batteries, of the lithium batteries, and so essentially they would bring them up to burn, raise the temperature, make them burn. One of the tests was a runaway test where they brought the temperature way up, and they would measure the concentrations in air, and then another analysis that I looked at, they actually put the fire out and then took the water that they used to extinguish the fire and analyzed those concentrations as well. And that's what I used to answer some of the questions.
Nick, if you're able to talk for a moment, there were some key takeaways that we wanted Nick to communicate to the board before we get into the individual answers, just about firefighting best practices with respect to storage incidents. Are you able to speak to this slide, Nick?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Jared. So as I mentioned with my introduction, ESRG actually conducts some of those large-scale fire testing, and we also have developed the preliminary emergency response procedures for both of these applications. And throughout the board, throughout all of our emergency response procedures, as a rule of thumb, and our guidance is that a defensive firefighting tactic is taken if there ever is an event that's associated with these energy storage systems. And when I talk about that defensive, it's really the opposite of an aggressive direct attack. Using copious amounts of water to try to suppress these events. It's really using the incident commander's guidance from the subject matter expert and water to be only used in an event where cooling is necessary for adjacent cabinets or even for adjacent exposures. And there's a tremendous amount of benefits to that. I mentioned over there in the PowerPoint that you allow the energy storage system to consume itself in a controlled fashion. These energy storage systems have to go through rigorous fire testing where they can prove that that failure, what we call that thermal runaway event, is really isolated towards that initiating unit, whether that technology can isolate that failure to the individual component of it, the modules, or whether the unit itself can safely sort of self-consume without involving any of the adjacent units. And there's a little bit of a caveat to that, is that in order for this to really be properly implemented, it does require training and familiarity with the local fire department. So they're aware of this energy storage system being installed in their jurisdiction, but also they're aware of the emergency response procedures and those defensive firefighting approaches, which we really take near and dear. We really truly believe that training is probably one of the more critical components to making sure that these emergency response procedures are implemented properly. So that's really a big one on our firefighting best practices, and these seem to be the best rule of thumb throughout the industry as well, and have been implemented throughout a number of projects, especially throughout any of ESRG's projects that we develop emergency response procedures for. And if I could also, Jared, real quick, that incident that was brought up before, that McMicken incident, one of the benefits of a system sort of consuming itself is it does sort of reduce those flammable off-gassings, and it'll severely reduce any chance of deflagration or explosion. And that was the primary issue at that incident, where those 4 firefighters were injured, 2 very critically injured, is explosion protection. And those issues have been sort of they've been addressed in the codes and the updated fire codes, but also this self-consumption approach becomes a tremendous benefit to reducing that hazard.
Great, thanks, Nick. So with those summaries as a little bit of a lead-in, if you recall, just flash here for a moment. I won't read all of them, but these were the 10 questions that the board had asked us to look into, mostly around what are the best practices when an event happens, should water ever be used, and post-event. Most of the questions 3 through 9, I think, are about or 3 through 8 are about what happens afterwards. Is there anything that's in the air or could get into the soils or groundwater, and how could they be remediated if that were to happen? So between Weston and Sampson and ESRG, we answered those, and that was in the letter that Greg provided middle of last week. And we've got the high points here and can speak to the content that we submitted and take any questions in the discussion, either during our answers or afterwards. So with that, we can get right into number 1, which was what is the required and recommended response to a fire battery system. Many of these things are in the summary that Nick just gave, but this was the answer that Nick and his firm helped us reach for the board. Nick, do you want to go into any of the specifics here?
I think the really important approach is understanding sort of in this worst case scenario event, this credible worst case scenario event, that water is really to be used defensively. So it sort of reduces the propensity for an extravagant amount of water to be provided on site, and it really just limits it to allowing the firefighters to do their defensive firefighting approach tactics by taking water and only using it in a defensive fashion to either cool by adjacent units, but also to, if necessary, cool adjacent exposures. And a lot of these requirements, a lot of these separation distance are already incorporated into the energy storage system design. So that use of that water will really be only in an extreme event, if warranted, if determined by the local incident commander, and consultation from the subject matter expert, that water is going to absolutely be needed. There's a tremendous benefit to not utilizing water, as we can see over there in those bullet points as well. So that water usage can be severely reduced, and it also has a lot of benefits to reducing that amount of water that needs to be provided for each one of these sites. But again, these are all predicated upon the fire department's familiarity with the emergency response procedures and best practices.
Mr. Chair.
May I ask
go ahead, Sherry.
Have you talked with our fire departments about this? About firefighting techniques and minimizing use of water, and are they on board with this?
Yeah, I had a short conversation last week. This was, I think, the last question, or a piece of it in the last question. I had a short conversation with Chief Kelly last week. What he told me was, well, I was reaching out to him just to let him know that we've done this research and get him a copy of exactly what we sent to you folks last week. What he said to me was that his concerns about the project had not changed since they were brought into the review during the approvals, the original approvals for the project. He referenced the past projects that are built and in the ground today in town, and what the developers and EPC companies did, in those instances, which was provide I think all the plans, all the access information, lockbox and knockbox information, and a tour of the site, and information about the location of all the critical equipment at the end of construction. He said that all of his concerns would remain the same, and the note that he gave during the review cycle for these projects had not changed. He was interested in the information that we had here, so I sent it to him, and I also told him that we had retained Nick and his company to draft emergency response plans for these, and he would like a copy of those once they're in final form.
More specifically, did he give you any kind of response to the question of any constraints on firefighting techniques that the fire department might use?
I didn't ask him about that specifically. That wasn't one of the questions that we were given, but he didn't express. What he said was his concerns had not changed since his department issued the letter with the approval.
Okay.
We should find that letter, because the subsequent letters we got didn't really list.
Yeah.
I have just a question in general, or for Nick. How does this recommendation and any other recommendations that flow through here relate to NFP 55, and particularly, hopefully I got the right reference, NFP 55 with the Massachusetts adjustments? Because Massachusetts diddled around with the requirements. Per my meeting with, I didn't meet with Chief Kelly, but I met with two of the fire captains, and their comment was, we're going to just follow NFP 55 with the Massachusetts amendments. So can you speak broadly how this aligns with NFP 55 or the Massachusetts mods?
850.
Yeah, absolutely. And 855 is what we consider the gold standard. We're on the second revision of NFP 855 at the moment, on the 2023 edition, with 2026 edition coming shortly because it's on a sort of a 3-year cycle. But we do ultimately consider that industry best practices, along with the most recent edition of the 2021 IFC. They're very closely related, and these do not provide any sort of conflict. It's actually in alignment with a lot of the requirements in NFPA 855. There's no prescriptive requirements on emergency response procedures. Only that emergency response plan is developed and it is reviewed with the fire department. So it gives it a little bit more leeway to whoever is developing that emergency response procedure to tailor it towards that specific technology. But ultimately, even in the appendix and the annex of that document, when we provide a lot of sort of guidance documents, it's based off of emergency response procedures like the ones that ESRG developed and a number of other sort of industry leaders in this area. So if anything, we are very much in alignment with those industry best practices, and we use it ourselves as a general rule of thumb whenever we're evaluating any project. So bottom line is that we are in alignment with the 855 standard, as well as the most recent requirements of the International Fire Code, and also the Fire Code adoptions in Massachusetts.
Okay, thank you. And just one more, with your conversation with Chief Kelly, was he open to training, the kind of training you're speaking to?
Yeah, in fact, it was part of the proposals that we got from Nick's firm, A, to support our answering these questions for you folks, B, to develop the emergency response plans, and C, to provide training once the projects are up.
And Chief Kelly was amenable to that?
I told him that was, we had retained this firm and that was available to him. He seemed to have an interest. I don't want to speak for him about how interested or if he would take us up on that, but that's certainly on the table. Yeah.
Okay.
But again, just to reiterate the conversation with the past projects as well, that was the process was that once things started construction, there was the walkthrough, there was the meeting, there was the transition of responsibilities. So that has precedence, which is what the fire department wanted before, and that would definitely continue at a minimum, but we'd be happy to supplement with training.
Great.
I just have one question. You referenced your conversation with Chief Kelly and the fact that he had no other concerns past their initial comments in the letter that they sent to the board. So how does your emergency response plan address his comments? Because he really didn't say the emergency response plan is going to alleviate his concerns. He said he didn't have any more past those, correct?
No, I don't want to put, I had a under 10-minute conversation with him, so I don't want to commit to more details than what it was. It was a short conversation. My goal of the conversation, as I told him, was to make him aware that we had done this research for you folks and make that available to him.
Because the only reason that I bring it up is their last letter to the board dated June 26th of this year. It touches on the fact that they cannot commit one way or another to the use of water. So that concern still kind of is hanging out there.
I read that letter. It didn't, the word water was not anywhere in that letter.
This is,
Well, we're probably talking about different letters. That was not from Chief Kelly, right? That
Yes,
letter.
He was from somebody else on his staff.
Captain Smith, who's the fire safety officer.
Yeah, I met with Captain Smith, and
Right.
he reiterated that position, and he also reiterated he didn't want the board dictating how they fought fires.
Correct, right. And not to believe.
He was very supportive, by the way. He just...
Right.
It's
Yep.
just
No, I'm familiar with the 626 letter.
Yeah, his letter does state that the fire suppression tactics with the potential of hazardous water runoff, unfortunately, we can't provide specific suppression tactical plan. So that question's still kind of up in the air. So if their emergency response plan addresses that in detail, then that's a good thing, as long as it does specifically address it, the fire department is educated on it, and they are on board with it.
But ultimately, it's their decision.
But at the end of the day, the guy in the first truck that says, all right, crap, we need water, is still gonna be able to make that call.
Which is why this piece, I believe, is really critical. That's why we had Nick and his firm, who is on the leading edge of all the current best practices about this. Should the fire department be interested in it, they are available, and we would be happy to provide them with the final plans and some training.
And education. Because the education component, I think, is the part that I'm most eager about, because it is a largely volunteer fire department. There's a lot of young people that work on it. So making sure that those people are educated with this information is obviously going to be critical to making sure that we protect ourselves.
Yep. That was a key piece for why we asked for the proposal that Nick and his company gave us to be scoped the way that it is. So we understand what it would take for their firm to finish that plan and provide the training, and we're willing to do that.
And then we would need to get the buy-off of the fire department, and they would, they would have to be willing to be bound, and then I think we still have the question of what if, and that we need to work on as well.
Right. Yeah.
So there was some discussion, it was a bit rhetorical maybe, but some discussion about there being a regional department that would, because there are so many solar farms in the area, and there was discussion about doing a regional,
Almost like a tactical team.
yeah, that would cover a number of towns.
I've never heard that.
So I know nothing about it. I just heard rumblings about it and wonder if that's something to add to the mix. That if there's pretty sophisticated training that needs to be maintained, then maybe that's the way to do it, rather than trying to maintain the training of so many small fire departments that are, for the large part, volunteer. So anyway, just put that out there.
If there's nothing else, I can keep us moving here. Question 2 was, in the event that water is used, how much would be used, or how much would be needed to be put out a fire? This is another one that Nick was able to look into for us, and Nick, I'll let you speak to this one if you don't mind.
No, perfect, Jared. Thank you. And I think mentioning before, our defensive firefighting tactics really will reduce the amount of water that needs to be utilized during these events. And I think this ultimately, with another caveat, is that the fire department needs to be aware of the emergency response procedures and trained to understand this tactic, because this technology is pretty advanced, and that there's a lot of information that is provided to the incident commander to be able to provide them with some guidance as to really what to do in an event. And that's what that fourth bullet point is. It's called data-informed fireground operations. And what data-informed fireground operations really are is allowing the incident commander to leverage the information that they're going to be receiving on site from that battery management system, right? It's the eyes and ears, the heartbeat of this energy storage system, and understand the impact of these systems, or the impact of the failing system on the adjacent systems that will be pretty much hopefully unaffected. Water will really only be utilized if these data-informed information that's being provided to the incident commander and that subject matter expert that's going to be providing guidance to the incident commander is going to allow them to determine if water needs to be defensively, not only when to use water, but when also to not use water or to stop using water. If temperatures are trending, if temperatures are going towards a more benign state, it really limits an excessive use of water when it's really really not necessary, and it holistically builds up on our emergency response procedures for those defensive firefighting tactics. So leveraging all of this information that's available to them at that site makes it tremendously beneficial when we're talking about emergency response procedures. And it also allows for a fire department, even if it is a volunteer fire department, to be able to manage any of these events without having to use any sort of special equipment or special tools, other than understanding the emergency response procedures and being familiar with the site in their jurisdiction, in their response area. And like Jared had mentioned, this is one of our critical components. Every time we send out an emergency response procedure, we put an item in there for fire department training. That's actually how we finalize our emergency response procedures. It follows with that training of the fire department to make sure that everything is installed according to the plan, and that training is conducted with even regular updates provided on a yearly basis to make sure that even with turnaround, the local department is familiar with our ERPs.
Thanks, Nick. Marie and Steve, I think you have the next several questions here, so I can advance these and let you take these. But question 3 was about the potential air toxicity issues relating to battery fires.
And battery fires resemble any plastic fire in terms of their emissions, which include carbon monoxide, hydrochloric acid, hydrogen fluoride, and hydrogen cyanide and benzene. They were similar to plastics that you might find within a couch or other building materials. And average emission rates generally of fires with plastics with the equivalent mass exceed the emissions from batteries. The air concentrations surrounding battery fires did not pose a significant health risk at 2 different locations where the testing was completed in Warwick, New Hampshire, and Lyme, New Hampshire.
New York. New York.
Oh my gosh, sorry. New York. Both of those are in New York.
Do we know what that range was? That's not indicated.
It was not presented.
We'd probably want to know what the range is.
So, just, Mr. Chairman, if I may, you made a key, and thank you, by the way, for this analysis. I've tried to read it multiple times, but you made a key statement, equivalent mass. So those measures of air concentration, was that a similar mass to a Connex container full of batteries that we're proposing in this project? And what, in general, would that mass be?
So I'm not sure how big the mass is going to be, but all of the masses were presented in the individual. I looked at multiple studies. So some of them were like big ones, like we're talking here. Others were smaller and scaled down.
Okay, so are you going to speak to this?
Yeah, I think if I
Thank
could
you.
add. So Mike Conway, I'm from the New Leaf team, electrical engineer, licensed in Massachusetts. What we've got referenced in the bottom points here, the air quality monitoring that took place during the response to the 2 fires in New York. Those battery systems are comparably sized. They're bigger than what we're proposing to install at our 2 sites here. But in terms of comparison of mass, they didn't find any air quality measurements that were above allowable standards at those 2 incidents, and I think we could expect.
So we can extrapolate, say, mass for like mass.
Yes.
Your assessment is that the impact was, I don't want to say negligible, but within a risk tolerance level, safe for human.
Within allowable standards is the terminology that
Okay.
they used, and specifically the Warwick fire had more sensitive receptors than we're going to have at either of those sites. That was on the school district's property, and school is not that far away, so they're very concerned about that. Obviously, in our 2 sites, we're in the middle of a solar field. We're going to be set much further back from anything, but I think it's a good indication in terms of those levels that they monitored being within allowable levels.
And now I'm going to just follow on, before.
Sure.
Within allowable standards, So that says within that standard, at some distance from the center, it's safe for humans.
Yes,
I could safely draw that conclusion.
I believe that's true.
Would you, as part of the emergency response, would there be an evacuation necessary to achieve that allowable?
I would probably defer to Nick on that for the specifics of the emergency response plan. I know he's got a section in there about the staging of the first responders being at least 100 feet away from the batteries. So at least that's an area that.
Okay, so yes, I'm very much concerned about the first responders, but my question was more about the citizens in the surrounding area. So I'm just trying to draw conclusions or make sure the conclusions that I'm inferring are correct. So within the defined boundary that we've set up with the 50-foot setbacks and the batteries being placed, citizens in general are going to be safe from the gas. Right now, that's the only thing we're talking about right now. That's the for the mass of the batteries that you're talking about. That's what this is sort of saying to me as a layman.
Based on the readings they took in New York and the size of those systems compared to the size of our systems, I would believe that to be true. Yes.
And are you, the information you have, the readings, is that from the special report that the state has requested, or where are those readings come from?
Yeah, it hasn't been released yet, the special, we're waiting with bated breath for that to be released. The reporting on this came from interviews with the first responders right out at the site. So basically it was reported by the local news agencies. And
so
they're asking the fire chiefs, what were the results of the air quality monitoring? Should people around here feel safe? And they gave those answers verbally.
And that was after a shelter-in-place order was given? Yeah. Yeah, I think there was also another battery storage fire in California where a shelter-in-place instruction was provided. That was a relatively larger fire, but I think still the concern was that there might be air quality impacts. And I'll give you some cites on this in a list of citations that I have. But so you're saying that as far as you can tell, based on your research, there are no air quality issues, or there would be none as a result of a fire?
I can say that I think what I'm comfortable saying is that based on what we've seen recently from fires in New York on comparably sized systems, that there was no cause for sort of, there was no evidence of public harm in those quantities of contaminants in the air quality that they measured at those sites.
And Chris, you know this is a really important answer for us, is that our charge is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the people. So your confidence and our confidence in those measures is going to be vital to where we go on this.
Mike, I need to take a bio break.
Sure. If everybody is okay, we'd like to take a quick 4 or 5 minute break.
Sure.
Appreciate
I
that.
drank the coffee so I could stay awake. know that that's going to satisfy the
They
citizens.
have the training.
The other, well, I think we should try and find that. Their concerns were access roads, and how wide the access roads were.
I'll keep us moving here. Number 4 was about water being used during a fire event, what its toxicity is, and if it can be contained before discharging into the ground and potentially to groundwater. This is another one that Marie and Steve helped us with.
Yeah, so again, in laboratory results, the results for the extinguishing material from the internal. Ooh. Is it closer or further? Okay. All right. So the laboratory results for contaminants in the extinguishing water were similar to materials from an internal combustion engine. They were comparing internal combustion engines to batteries for cars, which are also lithium batteries. The testing assumes the effluent flows directly into surface water, which is rarely the case. That effluent did cause toxicity to like Daphnia magna and various organisms that they tested it on, but that's assuming that that effluent is directly in contact with aquatic organisms, whereas in real life testing or real life, it would be not necessarily make it to surface water. Various containment measures are likely to contain the fire suppression water, and significant dilution will occur prior to the fire suppression water discharging into any ground and potentially into groundwater and surface water. The pH was neutral to somewhat basic, up to around 9.2, which is unlikely to impact aquatic life. And then the stormwater features will be used for containment, right? So.
Mr. Are we going to ask questions? One at a time? You were going to go?
Yeah, I wondered, one of our concerns is in fact the fire water runoff going into our water resources, and and I wondered if you had a chance to look at the question of if there were quantities of water used on a battery storage fire in the particular cases we have, what is the possibility, likelihood that that water would go into water resources with marine species in them?
Well,
Be a good lead into this, to the next question here, where part of this
Yeah.
may speak to that, Marie, if we want to segue there.
right. So there were some laboratory tests where they measured what was in the extinguishing water, and did some comparison to, essentially, if you look at the memo, I did a comparison to our standards. And so Massachusetts DEP Method 1 standards, which the GW1 is protective of drinking water, and the GW3 is protective of aquatic organisms. And only antimony exceeded the drinking water standard. And that's assuming that the extinguishing water is directly drank, whereas, there's various mitigation measures that would hopefully keep that extinguishing water from reaching, groundwater and surface water.
So I'm going to ask some sharp questions.
Okay.
Before I say these, I want you all to know that I really appreciate the work that you've done on this, and the amount of care you've taken to understand our position. and to understand what our concerns are. And I think you all have done this throughout at least the time that I've been watching you in front of this board, so I appreciate it. And my questions are really more to let you know other areas where it might be helpful to have some additional information. And one of them is, what could, given the placement of the batteries, what could the actual water flows be? I mean, I understand you're giving us the results in a lab, but I'm interested in knowing more about what it might be like on this particular site. So I think more information on that would be good. I am not a chemist. The last time I took chemistry, I think, was in high school, and I just celebrated my 51st high school reunion, so it's been a few years. But I looked up antimony, and it's kind of it sounds like it's a heavy-duty thing. And so more information on that, possible quantities and possible levels. I mean, that's the one you say might exceed drinking water levels, and it would be important for us to know more about what that might mean. And so that additional information would be very helpful to us. And for those of us, again, I don't see a chemist among us anywhere really, except Jane, you may have another master's that I'm not aware of. But for us to understand what all this means may require some additional in-depth information. And I am leaning in the direction of the need for us to hire an expert, at least one expert, to help us understand this. And I appreciate the objectivity that you're trying to show. I think what we might want is someone that we would give exactly the same guidance to, which is we want you to be objective, but we want some additional information on, battery storage and what it could mean for this community. Not so sharp, I guess.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, through you, first a simple question. What is a VOC?
Volatile organic compound.
Okay, so just a suggestion for lay reports in the future, if you use acronyms.
Sure, yes. Well, it is in the memo.
Okay, which I did read, but I missed it.
Okay.
That was a simple question. This may be back for Nick, but on the previous slide, you were talking about vehicle fires, using some vehicle fires as maintenance. And our recent experience and some of the press, and I'm going to, I think, go back to Nick, but they use a lot of water on vehicle fires. How does that sort of fit in with your recommendation to not use? Why don't they let car fires burn out? That was for Nick, I think.
Yeah. And that's an excellent question. I think it's sort of a difference in, even though we're talking about a very similar sub-technology with lithium ion in general, it goes into a different sort of issue that arises with an electric vehicle or any vehicle fire for that matter, is that there's a direct life safety issue involved, and that usually involves extrication. Electric vehicle incidents typically happen in more densely populated environments, or there could be a direct life safety issue where people need to be extricated out from a vehicle. And water is then used aggressively, understandably so, to make sure that those flames are knocked down so that fire department and firefighters can conduct these extrication and get people out of a vehicle that could be damaged. But oftentimes, some of our emergency response procedures guidance is very much aligned in the electric vehicle realm, that if there is no life safety issue, if people have been extricated and the incident commander actually is in a situation or location where they can allow that vehicle to safely consume itself, it goes by those same principles. And we do training to the New York City Fire Department, especially around this issue. And the reduction of stranded energy is extremely beneficial in those tactics. So it ultimately kind of goes down to the discretion of the incident commander and what issue is on at hand. But even in that situation, I would provide that similar guidance to an incident commander, to a firefighter, that if they can allow it to burn, it has a tremendous benefit to that as well. And it really reduces that amount of water that's needed in a very aggressive tactic.
Okay. So In summary, I think what I'm hearing you say, notwithstanding what we read in the press, an incident commander who is responding to a vehicle fire has other or different considerations than that same incident commander who is responding to a battery fire in a solar array, and therefore would be guided to make perhaps different decisions. So it's not a direct corollary to say we use a lot of fire on a car, therefore we're going to use a lot of water on a, that's what you're saying. Okay.
You say it much better than I can, yes. Exactly.
Thank you.
It's also about the location where those are likely to occur, you know, on a road near other people in cars, or parked in a driveway around houses and other things.
Right, yeah, or the car is parked in the house, in the garage, yeah.
The location of these facilities is obviously very
Okay, so that would guide us to say that we want to consider in the solar projects, the site, the distance from other flammable objects, the distance from people, and as we review your application and your site plan, we should take that into consideration.
Keep us moving here. Stephen Marie, I think this was another one for you about pollutants that potentially get into the groundwater and their remediation.
Right. So hopefully containment measures will mitigate or minimize the migration of extinguishing water into the groundwater. However, if extinguishing water migrates into the surrounding area, the impacted media will be evaluated, to determine if there are concentrations. So, if some of the extinguishing water goes onto the soil, we'll be collecting some soil samples to analyze that. And we'll be comparing that to reportable concentrations. If those concentrations are above reportable concentrations, the Massachusetts DEP has a very regimented way of going through cleanup, and we'll follow the Massachusetts contingency plan to do that cleanup. And essentially, if soil is impacted, and we believe that it may have impacted groundwater, we'll collect both soil and groundwater. Depending on the results of groundwater, we'll see if it also impact other media such as surface water and, evaluate it as needed.
But who's financially responsible for this? Should that, that's after the fact. That's where we don't want to be.
Absolutely.
We absolutely understand that.
The responsible party is, I believe, the owner, right?
Project owner.
Project owner.
Under
So
the terms of the lease, the project owner would be responsible for that.
so the project owner is going to be an LLC, right? So the LLC is not going to have a lot of capital behind it. It's going to be, I don't want to minimize it by calling it a shell company, but that's kind of how these end up. So you've got a very thinly capitalized company potentially responsible for cleanup. I guess, I don't find that to be terribly comforting. So talk to me about how we should feel about that.
I mean, the projects are all structured with multiple levels of financial capacity, that they're financed. There's lenders, there's banks involved who have to feel the assurance that the project company can meet any burden it has. I don't think this is a situation that's very distinguished from an industrial property owner who's going to be an LLC, who would have risks, have exposure associated with a leak on a gas station, for instance. Those operators would operate under very similar corporate structure as a solar company.
That are insured. And if I may, so in my past, I've worked on emergency response teams that, car fires, vehicle accidents, they lose saddle tanks. So I've been involved with an airplane crash where the jet fuel explodes and there's a fire. And that fire was put out with water and foam, and as an environmental professional, we were hired and retained by the insurance companies. These projects are insured. And so these types of things tend to be superficial in nature, and they're fairly easy to clean up with an initial remedial response action. They're superficial. That's not to say that there's nothing, but a petroleum fire will follow the same path that water as you're spraying it, and you can track that water. We've gone and cleaned storm drains and soils that are impacted, and then you sink monitoring wells and you look for long-term impacts. And if there are any under the MCP, that those get addressed. And so I would offer to you that the project insurance would generally take care of that, because that's who paid our bills when we responded to our clients that were insured.
Yeah, to me, insurance is the opportunity to litigate. I mean,
No, ma'am. No, they were hired to go in and do the right things to respond. That's what pollution liability insurance is for.
But I understand what you're saying. I would just say that my experience being general counsel of the company that was in the position of having to address pollution issues was that we ended up in a lot of litigation in order to receive insurance benefits. So, it would be better if there was another additional layer of protection there.
Yeah, I don't know what instrument would be standard beyond that. But there is a responsible party, and people who pollute have a chain of responsibility. They're identified as a responsible party to respond to an incident like this.
So tell me more about that. I don't know, Greg, if this is something that you're prepared to talk about, but, liability, environmental liability doesn't necessarily stop at an LLC, does it?
No, it doesn't. And there, like I said, there's multiple layers involved. I mean, ultimately, the responsible party is going to, would include the landowner. Obviously, they're going to shift the burden to the project company, but they will be identified as a party to take responsibility if necessary. To Steve's point, one of the benefits is there might be a fight over the insurance coverage, but all the work to remediate and stop the problem has been done. And so they're fighting over who's paying the bills, but the response action is so prescripted under Mass DEP's rules that you're quickly analyzing and you're quickly responding, and there's some long-term issues occasionally come up. But if we, I think the response we had is, if you look at the risk associated with the effluent from a battery energy storage and compared it to the risks associated with the effluent from an industrial facility or a gas station, which, there's the most source of our fires around, vehicle leaks, and those are where we see more risk and more cleanup responsibilities in comparison. And not that necessarily comparison is the most critical part, but we think the structure for a response and the allocation of responsibility does address the concern that it would be taken care of.
And that I think this is an area where we need some more advice from an expert, is to determine how potential battery storage fires would compare with other accidents and how liability is handled. I think we need some additional information there.
So,
I agree.
Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr. Simpson. So, did I understand you to say that the Massachusetts contingency plan has the force of legal requirement to clean up the site?
Yes.
So the state would be supporting the town in enforcing a cleanup? That's what I'm hearing you say?
Even if it's a bankrupt company?
I mean, ultimately, the DEP has the ability to lien the property, and the lien would take precedence over any mortgage or any other lien. So it can get to that, but usually, I mean, it's...
No, I'm just trying, but you are saying that backing this up is ultimately, there's a state agency. What about a federal agency? Would it ever...
Then, Carl, the question is, you've got the state or federal backing, but who is there to pay the bills and to do it?
Well, again, good question, but I think Mr. Sampson said the question of who pays the bills comes after the cleanup has already been done.
Assuming there's someone there to clean up.
Well, that's why I'm asking, the state is going to help with that, right? Or,
It is a private system, so the obligation is on the landowner to perform the steps. There is state oversight, state auditing,
but the DEP is not necessarily going to step in to do the cleanup.
if there's no
Sometimes they have. I'm working on sites where the state has stepped in and had a non-responsive landowner, and the state took it upon themselves to do the assessment and to monitor for the levels of contamination in soil and groundwater. And those bills went unpaid for a long time until a solar developer came along and wanted to build on it, and then they settled up the state's tab from 20 years ago.
Yeah, this sort of mirrors the whole Superfund
It does.
site that we've lived with my whole life, so. All right, again, there's two parts to the question. Who pays, but how do we make sure it gets remediated? And they can be separated, although knowing who's going to pay helps ensure that it's going to get remediated. I don't know how I guess we could put a performance guarantee.
Well, you could have something like a guarantee from a company within the corporate family that is credit-worthy to the extent that they could cover foreseeable issues. And if the issues are as remote as you're telling us, that might not be a bad approach.
Okay, well, these are things that we have to struggle with.
Yeah. Thank you.
Number 7 was about impacts to wildlife and the environment with any materials that could potentially be washed into the ground. Marie, I think this is another one that you drafted for us.
Right. So it's unlikely that the materials being washed into the ground would have a significant impact on terrestrial or avian receptors, just because the nature of these, it's a pretty small area that's typically affected. Mostly from the data, it was metals, which are relatively easy to clean up out of soil. The cleanup of soil includes excavation of impacted materials, but only when residual concentrations are above Mass DEP cleanup standards. So we would go in, analyze the soil, see if they're above RCs first, and then, see if they're above cleanup standards and clean up appropriately. These fire events are not similar to large hazmat type spill events where there's significant impacts to the environment that get into groundwater and then go into surface water. These individual acute small fire or even a larger fire event will not impact, typically, according to, the review that I did of the literature. The larger fire in Arizona didn't affect any area outside of the very small area where the fire occurred. So fires associated with battery ESS do not pose greater risk to the environment when compared to industrial facilities, gas stations, and even commercial and residential structures. And then, of course, as we've kind of said, in the event of such a fire, we would, it would come under the MCP and, the cleanup would be required.
The cleanup and remediation process associated with water infiltration following a fire event. And there was a secondary question here about the materials that are left behind if something like that were to occur.
Right, so samples would be collected and analyzed for constituents from the data that we reviewed. Again, it was mostly metals that were in the extinguishing water. And if the concentrations are above RCs, then, that puts you into the system with DEP. They will issue a release tracking number, and you have a certain amount of time to go through the cleanup process. If there's evidence of impacts to water, monitoring wells will be installed and groundwater will be analyzed. And from that, if there's groundwater impacts, we will also analyze, any surface water that's in the areas as well, to ensure that any wells that are in the area are not impacted, as well as all the aquatic receptors and down gradient surface water.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Carl, sorry.
are you ready for a question on this slide? So, Mr. Chairman, through you to the applicant. So if contamination has been of groundwater in the wells, given the type of contaminants that you've typically identified, can they be easily remediated? So if I had a normal household filtration system, would a filtration system, we know that PFAs are a problem, but would these kind of contaminants be dealt with a normal kind of filtration that would be available to a homeowner?
Oh, yes. Yeah, you can pull metals out of a filtration, out of a filtration system. I have one in my house that does that.
Okay, so there's an expense, but it's not beyond remediation.
Oh, no. No, it's not beyond remediation.
Okay. Well, I guess that's important to know. I think that was my question for here.
Okay.
Good there.
I'm sorry.
I want to talk you over. Are you done with that?
Oh, yes, no, I had prepared my questions for these slides, so remediation was my question, because you didn't really mention remediation in any of, and we didn't really ask about remediation either, so that's fair.
The last couple questions are reasonably brief, so we'll take it home here. This one was about technological advances that have been introduced recently or are reasonably expected to be available for battery energy storage. This is one that Nick helped us with, and may call on Mike a little bit too. Nick, are you still there?
Jared, still here. And they're pretty self-explanatory. I mean, this industry is surprisingly not in its infancy. It's been through a number of code changes and a lot of proactive changes, especially as a result of that incident in Arizona, that making incidents. So the codes are really robust for the protections for these energy storage systems.
Thanks. The final question was about, we talked about this for a moment earlier, about whether or not the fire department has an incident response plan. That was what I touched base with Chief Kelly about for a moment last week. He's aware of this work that we've done, and that ESRG drafted emergency response plans for us, and that those can be finalized. Typically, the sequence of events there is finalize the designs to construction level drawings, then a company like ESRG is able to finalize, take from draft to final form their ERPs, and those could be provided to the department. Again, had reached out to Chief Kelly purely to create some awareness, and don't want to speak to his precise level of interest in that, but he seemed to be interested in us following that sequence of events and providing final ERPs once the designs are completed and the projects are ready for construction. And then, of course, as we were talking about earlier, once those plans are finalized, we'd be happy to provide training for his department on the contents of the plans.
So
Those were the 10 questions that you had. I hope that information was at least somewhat helpful, and we're happy to talk about anything else that you folks might have in mind.
So, Mr. Chairman, I have one final question regarding, this is an open-ended question, and it's difficult, but to the engineers in the project, if you were advising the board, what questions didn't we ask that we should have asked?
How quickly can you approve? No, I'm sorry.
Well, no, I understand, but I'm trying to, I mean, Ms. Quirk has thought that perhaps we need some more advice. Are there questions that went unasked? And you answered the questions that we asked, and that's always a danger to us when we ask questions. What questions didn't we ask? And I recognize that's a kind of off-the-cuff question, but...
So from my perspective, your questions are in line with others that we've seen from other boards. I don't think that you've missed anything major that we're like, boy, I wonder why they didn't ask us that. That's not the case.
Okay.
I'll echo that. We're permitting dozens of these projects across the country. This board has been incredibly thorough with its questions, specifically in the area of groundwater and contamination. I don't think I can come up with another question.
Well, I recognize that that's a difficult question, but thanks for answering.
We do appreciate you guys challenging us into the deepest volumes of the encyclopedia on this stuff. It's been, we learned a lot from that.
I do have one question. You alluded to your talk with Chief Kelly and his interest in the ERP, but it also sounded, the way you phrased it, that the ERP is drafted after the plans are approved. And I think the ERP is really kind of one of our largest concerns, obviously, is if we have an event, we want to know what the plan is. Does Chief Kelly agree with it? Is there going to be training put in place? That's all a big component of approving something. So for me, I would rather see an ERP drafted, at least in draft form.
Yeah,
first.
we have that today, and we can share that. And I should have maybe described that a little bit better. 97% of the ERPs can be completed. The reason why I described the sequence in the way that I did is that there are the planning level designs are a little bit higher level than construction level designs that literally describe every nut and bolt that goes into these projects. Those elements are not in the planning level designs. So the vast majority of the ERP is drafted today. That last mile or half a mile or whatever really can only be done until those details are in, and then we can finalize. But
Right.
certainly for the drafts that we have today, we can share those.
Yeah,
and that covers all the basics.
I think philosophically, I'd want to know how you tell us we're going to do it. Does the chief agree with you? And can we put a plan in place that ensures that? How fast he can make the first turn into the solar array, I don't care about that. So.
Right. Yeah, all those details can be shared now or very, with a little bit of work on the drafts, we can easily be shared now.
Okay. Yeah, I think having a copy of that would forward it to the planning office would be important.
All the main items, I think, are going to be in there now. The best practices that Nick was talking about earlier, defensive firefighting, where, access, equipment locations, all those things are able to be shared today, so.
Yeah, if I can offer too, I think we've hopefully demonstrated that we're, looking to work with the town. If there's, even as, we get further along, we're hoping that you'll acknowledge the extensions and we can start to plan the project's construction in accordance with the interconnection schedule. If the town learns of some different approach or some conditions, some requirements of the fire department, I think we've demonstrated we'd be more than willing to work with you as things develop. Obviously within reason, if there's legitimate concerns, we think we can address them. I think that's part of the reason why we undertook this, was we wanted to make sure that as we thought about this, we weren't missing any critical process or step or piece of information that would undermine the project, down the road. So we think we have, a good project that will go to construction, we think will work well with the fire department, continue to work well with the planning board, and just want to emphasize that that's our goal here is, again, to get the extensions acknowledged so that we can continue the interconnection process. And, we'll continue to speak with the board on addressing concerns and questions.
And I've got a question in that regard, but before I ask it, I did want to mention, before too much more time went by, that Greg is now a member of Sullivan and Worcester. I was a partner and member of the board of Sullivan and Worcester for a number of years. I just want to mention that. I think it has no real bearing on anything other than if I didn't mention it and someone became aware of it, would be, why didn't she tell us? So just to get that out there. You mentioned interconnection. I was looking at the docket today, and it looks like progress is slow, at least with getting DPU approval. Do you have any sense of what the timing of this is going to be for you?
I was hoping that you were going to say that you found something in the docket that I haven't seen yet. I would agree. It's been a little bit slow. All the information I have to share on that is anecdotal, so don't take this on any authority. But what I've heard is that with the administration changeover last fall and the new administration coming in and all the new seats being filled at the DPU, there are 2 or 3 orders that they've been a little bit slower to get out than they would have liked. Nothing new has happened on the studies and the results, and everything has been published, and as far as we know, they're forecasting sometime between now and the end of the year to approve it and issue the agreements.
Then, after the order is issued, how long for the construction schedule to go forward and for interconnection to actually occur?
The only thing, the only thing that I have to go by is the one other study that has been completed and really approved by DPU, and the time at which the utility, after the approval of the study, released the construction schedule. That was the Marion Fairhaven group. That was approved back in February, and the utility company just said last week that they're planning before the end of September to release the interconnection schedules for that group. So after approval, if it's a similar time, it's 6-7 months before they release the upgrade schedules for the Plymouth group, which these are a part of.
And in the record, you can find dates as long as 4 or 5 years for completion of the construction. Is that what we're looking at here?
That's what they said for the Marion Fairhaven group. I haven't heard what that is for the Plymouth group. I would expect it to be about the same. There's some substation upgrades and other things that take some time.
I mean, the thought occurs to me that we're spending a lot of time right now looking at a project that could, at least the battery storage piece of it, could change over the course of time. And I wonder, I don't know what anyone else thinks, and I see several courses available to us. One is to hire some experts and to really get into confirming what you're telling us, or figuring out what our conclusions are on what you've presented to us. And I would say I'm really happy with all the information you've provided, not only the quantity of it, but how you've provided it, because I think you've presented it in ways that don't try to obscure what is going on. And I appreciate it. It's not always what one gets, and so I appreciate that. But I wonder if we're going through a process that could better occur in a couple of years, and whether it might be possible and I don't even know if this is legally possible, to provide an extension conditioned on additional information coming in at a later point on battery storage. I do expect the technology to change, and for some of the questions that we're wrestling with now, and having difficulties with to be more settled in a couple of years. There are technologies coming out, as I'm aware, with respect to fire detection that are more advanced than anything we've seen. I've heard of a technology called Lion Tamer that is an early detection process for fire prevention. And if there are technologies that are in development, may be available by the time that your actual construction is happening, I wonder if we're better off waiting a bit, possibly providing you with an extension on the solar piece of it and coming back.
Yeah, some of the last elements here were a little bit rhetorical, but just 2 points about some of the first part of your statements there. There are 2 things which won't be changing about this, about the storage. One is the nameplate ratings of it, and what we've got the interconnection approval for is a 5 megawatt AC battery. So, whatever technology improvements or the products that are available when we go to place the POs for the equipment may change a little bit, but the actual nameplate and the physical, the capabilities and the specs for the battery are not going to change. The second part, which I think is important to understand too, is the codes and the UL listings and the testing that the batteries are subject to. They may change a little bit, but they're very stringent now. And if the product and the nameplate of the product meets all of those elements now, I think we can rely on that a lot in how we move forward here as well.
That's the most polite no I've ever heard.
But it's not to say that if we had the extension and other things came to light. I mean, anything that we have that is within that nameplate and has to meet the codes when we go for the building permit anyway. So all of that will be subject to fire code, fire department approval, and building inspector approval.
But as far as we know, you may be looking at a different battery technology that isn't so subject to thermal runaway. I guess that's a simple way of, what at least I would be looking at is there a technology that could be substituted that would not present the safety issues that we're concerned about? I understand your position is that those safety issues don't exist, and that's an answer. That is, and that's a position you're completely entitled to take. And then we have to figure out how we feel about that.
Mike, you can just stay up here so you don't have to keep...
It makes me feel like we're coming to the end if I move back. Yeah. The thing I wanted to add about alternative technologies, so we're really interested in those. We've been awarded a grant from the state of New York's Energy and Research and Development Authority, NYSERDA, to do a project in New York with non-lithium technology. So I've been looking into this for the past year since we got the grant. And a lot of those technologies, we're really excited about them. They're really far behind. And I think even the ones that are the most promising have some real performance deficiencies when it comes to lithium ion. And lithium ion has been building momentum in the consumer electronics world, in every laptop, every cell phone. It's a really, really entrenched technology, despite some of its downsides. And I think we're going to see a lot more things like NFPA 855 getting improved, new UL standards around safety. But if I were taking a guess based on looking into a lot of these non-lithium technologies for the past year, I would say that lithium is still going to be the incumbent, and that these technologies are being used for other things like long duration storage, where you're storing energy for 12 hours or 24 hours. There's a company that just spun out of MIT that's doing that with an iron air battery. But it's for different uses, and it's mostly those things don't fit well with the use case here that we've got for these 5 megawatt solar plus storage products in Massachusetts. So I'm hopeful for those technologies, but they're sort of in a distant second right now, is the way I term it.
And you think the lithium ion technology is one that can be as widely deployed as is envisioned now? And part of what I read in the press also is there are limitations on not only lithium, but other of the elements of the, and I don't mean that in a technical sense, of the battery technology. And I wonder if we may be working against limitations in any event because of, scarcity of materials.
Yeah, I think on a really large level, when you talk about like replacing every car on the road, that starts to come up. But there's 40 lithium-ion batteries in this room right now. So it's going to continue. The uptick of deployment of lithium-ion is going to continue to go up for a long time before we sort of hit those upper limits of, raw material availability and things like that.
Okay. Well, so my concerns rotate around three issues, and you've heard about them all, so I don't need to say much. One is the firefighting techniques and the willingness and ability of the fire department to be bound to a less water approach. And I just haven't heard that from them yet. And I don't know whether they can bind themselves. The second issue is with or without a lot of fire water runoff, what about contamination? What could the consequences of that be? And I think in detail, as I asked Marie, looking at this site, what is it that it could be? And then the third one is sort of financial backing for this. And the question of who pays and how the town of Wareham can be, which is not a wealthy town, as you know, not really able to shoulder burdens associated with a big or even a small environmental issue. How is it that Wareham says to itself, we won't end up with abandoned facilities, we won't end up with, with accidents or contamination or environmental issues? How, because someone will be here and will take care of it, and preferably they will take care of it before anything happens. Those, I think are my big issues. The air issue, I think, is just subject to, expert, just confirming that other experts agree with this, as well as with the other three issues that I've just mentioned. So at this point, I'd recommend we look for some experts. And I would also suggest we consider opening a public hearing on this, because I think we'll benefit from information that others can bring in, and it will extend this process. But given where the interconnection is, I don't know that we run the risk of putting you in a jam. I know it's, it introduces some additional uncertainty, but I think we're trying to deal with uncertainty in figuring out tools that we can use. But those are my suggestions, and I would invite others to express their points of view.
I don't want to, I'm not going to comment on your ending. We can discuss that. I had two questions. One, I want to clarify with the applicant what I inferred from Ms. Quirk's original assessment is that should we grant the extension, would be for 2 years, we should expect that you're going to be back here in 2 years asking for another extension, given the history of how this project evolves. We should be anticipating that.
I don't know that that's necessarily true, just because the time periods you were talking about was the time period for Eversource to complete all the upgrades that will allow the project to interconnect. We, of course, have fairly large construction projects ahead of us that don't get constructed in one day. So typically what we do, we're 18 to 24 months prior to Eversource finishing their work, we would break ground on the construction for our project. So if the agreements come out and the schedules come out that say it's about 4 years to the available interconnection date, we would start construction, 2 years prior to when that's available.
That
So-
would still be 2 years
Yeah, so
from now.
it's possible, if we got a 2-year extension, that's right about the time that we'd probably be breaking ground if the upgrade schedule was 4 years, so.
Okay, that was just a clarifying question. This is a question through you to probably Mr. Buckland. Are you out there, Ken?
Yes, I am.
Hi, Ken. Mr. Chairman, through you to the planning office. Ken, one of the discussions that Ms. Quirk fostered was a discussion of evolving technologies. Does a change in technology for the batteries, or even for the panels, but what does that constitute a modification to our permit? Or what degree of technology change would trigger a modification, a requirement for a modification?
I think that is something you have to put into the condition of the approval as to what standard you want to apply to the change in the project. It would be a significant change that requires a reconsideration.
And for an extension, that's not necessarily something we could do. Although I guess if the applicant were amenable. But for new projects, we should perhaps consider that as a condition to clarify.
Yeah, I think it's something, if we talked beforehand about what's the significant change, a significant modification, instead of the condition we have in there in place, it says that the board determines what a significant modification is. You predetermine what a significant modification would be in terms of technology, then it's clear what your standard is going to be.
Okay. That's also something we could consider adding to our evolving rules and regulations. Is that an appropriate place for that?
It could be, yes.
Okay, so that's future consideration, but it just, the question occurred in my mind. Thank you.
You're welcome.
If I could just quickly share this with you all. These are, and I'm sorry, I've only got one left. These are some additional articles that I wanted to share with you. This, one is another storage fire in California, just to get your sense of, if there's anything that we need to learn there. Another is alleged underreporting of solar farm fires. I think this is mainly out of Europe, but be interested in your reactions to that as well. And then, let's see if I can get this. And then something on antimony. I'd, again, sort of like more information from you on antimony and its risk factors. We've got, in this area, we've had situations with spills of benzene, for example, being allegedly linked to greater cancer risks in this area. And I just would like to hear your thoughts on this.
Okay, right now?
No,
Okay.
I mean, if you could come back with some additional information, that'd be great.
Sure, yeah, I can do some research on antimony and come back with that.
The only thing that I had that Sherry didn't steal all my thunder on.
Yes.
As you were going through all the slides and explaining each slide, which you did do in detail, thank you. I heard a lot. I heard the same words over again. Mitigation, really, the groundwater's really affected. There was a lot of what ifs, nothing really definitive. So in addition to obviously the fire department training and the emergency response, which I think is super critical, what would in as much detail as practical, what would a cleanup mitigation process look like? And definitively, who would pay for it? Because the answers on that were kind of up in the air as well. So just to put it in as simplistic a term as I know how, battery catches fire, the on-site fire safety officer shows up, forgets all the training, or he's on vacation, the chief's in Hawaii, and the first lieutenant, who's been a volunteer for the past 5 years, is the first guy on scene, and he's like, I'm in charge. And he uses water, and he uses a ton of it. So let's pick a number out of the hat. He uses 50,000 gallons of water, which I think is grossly underestimating it, but I'll use that number. What would be the process? Where do we find that 50,000 gallons of water? How do we determine if, in fact, it is toxic? How would we remove it or deal with it to the point where it is absolutely not a detriment to the citizens who might be getting their groundwater or their drinking water from that area? And who's going to pay for it when it's all over and done with? You know, just like that kind of apocalyptic worst-case scenario. We don't ever want to have it happen, but and I don't think I heard it once tonight, but, you know, we're a sole source aquifer. We only have one shot at this. You know, there's a lot of great plans for an event, but at the end of the day, if it happens and we don't have the right plan in place, the only people that are going to somebody gets sued to pay for it, you know, they lose a few nights' sleep and they get a couple of bills from their lawyer. If the water gets contaminated, it's the people that live in town that are going to live with it. You know, there's nobody that's going to help them out with that at that point. So, you know, if we could look at that kind of worst-case scenario and say, all right, this is how we would attack it, heaven forbid if it should ever happen, I think that, coupled with the training for the fire department and the plan for the emergency response, I think would give the townspeople a little bit of level of comfort that, you know, this isn't well, this is how we might handle it. It's, yep, it happened. You know, we're in it up to our eyeballs now. This is how it's gonna get handled. So, that was really the only thing I was thinking about. In addition to everything that you, 2 pages of notes, you took it all. So, Sam?
I haven't said a lot. My main concern is the aquifer. It's not just Wareham, it's 7 other communities. It's a single source. If it happens once, and that scenario happens, we're done. We have no water. And I think there's 7 other communities. I don't think you can mitigate against that. That's my main concern, and I don't think you can do anything about it.
Mike?
Sam said it all, I guess. I have nothing to say.
Jay?
What else can I add?
I know, I think we've covered it fairly thoroughly tonight. And
I could not agree more.
We don't take it lightly. We do appreciate you coming and spending the time with us, because it is you know, solar is a part of our society nowadays, but we do take our charge here to protect the townspeople seriously and make sure that we thoughtfully either, you know, approve projects or not. And we do that based on the most information we can possibly get. So with that, I'm going to assume you've taken lots of notes. You kind of know what we're looking for. I hazard to even ask this question, but do you have any idea when you'd like to come back and we can pick this up based on the information we've asked for?
I think we do have pretty good notes. I think we probably need to discuss a little bit how much of a project it's going to be to take these additional questions on. Is the best thing maybe for us to do that among ourselves and think about how much time that's going to take and how much of a project that is, and then coordinate with Ken?
Okay.
Or is it better to pick a date now?
Well, I think we need to continue to a date certain, and then if you're not ready, we can.
We can move it forward. We won't hold your feet to the fire. I think we do need a placeholder, though.
Okay.
Are you 16th and 30th of October? Is that?
Just the 16th.
Yeah, and the 16th's already filled up, so I really don't want to put anything else on there.
What's the next hearing date after that?
That would be November 13. That would
Why
be
don't we
our
pencil
next.
that in for now, and if we think it's going to take longer to complete these, we'll do it as quickly as we can, but we can coordinate an
Yeah,
extension.
and just, keep in mind, I mean, you obviously know our intent on making sure we do this right, so don't rush through it just to make that date. If you decide you need another week or two, push it out till the 27th. Let's do it right, rather than kind of monkey through it.
Okay.
That's fine. I mean, that's what we did with we didn't come back, we gave you the summer off, so we could do this work, but we would certainly approach it the same.
Okay?
I think it would be good for us to hire an expert.
Yeah.
I have a recommendation.
Yep. No, I agree. That'll give us some time, too, and we may find come the 16th that we may need a little bit more time. But
Right.
we can convene as that date gets closer. Okay. Thank you for your time. We appreciate all your efforts. And I would move that we officially continue our discussions on 720 Borrego Solar and 9-20 Borrego Solar to the Wareham Planning Board meeting of 11/13.
Mr. Chair, before we vote on that, a question through you to Ms. Quirk. Just to clarify, when you say the board hiring its own expert, you're talking about engineering, environmental, that kind of expert, yes?
It's fire safety.
Yes, I have repeatedly asked for legal advice. I don't know if we can get an environmental lawyer to address some of our questions. And just sort of a related on that, Ms. Quirk, are we meeting with Mr. Bowen this Wednesday?
As far as I know, I'll check the schedule to make sure of that, but I was told that we would be.
And this does not reflect on Mr. Bowen, but there's some deep dive questions about Massachusetts law and our ability to regulate in this area that I don't know the answer to.
All right, well, let's let these people call it a night. I'm sure they have drives to make. So I would entertain a motion to move both 720 Borrego and 920 Borrego to the planning board meeting of November 13th. You have a motion by Sam Corbett, seconded by Jane Gleason. All in favor? Sherry?
Aye.
Mike? Jane?
Aye.
Sam?
Aye.
Carl? Doesn't want to leave.
No, I'm just not sure that delaying anymore, we're going to learn anything. But that's what I'm thinking about. You asked me to make at this point, I guess I can agree to delay. But we just keep dragging it out, asking for more and more information, which I understand.
Yeah, I think more and more information is a good thing. I would feel much worse about either just arbitrarily denying it or arbitrarily rubber stamping it, and then having that decision come back and bite us in the
Okay,
hind.
I understand the board's position on it. I just don't think we're going to get the perfect answer. And that's why I have the legal question as to what flexibility we actually have to regulate.
And this additional time is the perfect way to address that.
Okay. No, the other way to regulate or to get that is to get a court opinion for whichever decision we make.
Okay. Well, we can discuss that at the next meeting.
All right, well, those are my considerations for my vote.
Okay, I understand. And your vote is?
I'll agree with the board at this point.
Okay. The chair votes aye. We'll see you on November 13th.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Do you want to give us a report on the
Yeah,
rules and
no
regs?
town meeting.
So we moved
We-
to here and here.
No, that, and that's,
Oh, understood.
yeah. We only
Right.
have one meeting.
Okay, got it.
Motion to adjourn, did I hear that?
You did, and
Have a second?
seconded it.
Motion by Sam Corbett, seconded by Mike Baptiste, all in favor. Sherry?
Aye.
Mike? Jane?
All right.
Sam?
Aye.
I know Carl doesn't want to leave.
Aye.
And chair votes aye.